just parking consumers for a moment and turning to landlords and thinking about a couple of the measures that were announced in Jeremy Hunt's budget last week. So I'm now thinking about the increase on tax dividends, and also the increased tax on dividends, and also the reduction in capital gains tax allowance. So clearly, if you're a professional landlord and you're holding your properties in a special purpose vehicle, those are things that could impact you. So where do we think that that's going to sit in the PRS, and what's happening with buy-to-let lending? Is all of that now calming down, or is that a slightly different risk appetite with lenders? How's all that sitting?
It's the latter. I mean, I think there's a whole load of interesting stuff caught up in this, because the PRS, the private rental sector, as you know, plays a tremendously important role. There's also been a lot of negative on a landlord in the last, 5-6 years, roughly, give or take. The various changes that come through in terms of tax, affordability, and I can go on, everyone knows what's happened to the landlord. And it reached a fairly steady state, as how I'd understand or describe it. What's happened as a consequence of the budget is, to spell it out, and I'm sure everyone's aware, but the interest coverage ratio in terms of buy-to-let lending criteria has been completely shot. So what you've basically seen is landlords, if they're on rates that have had to rise, obviously that's now out of kilter with the rental being charged, and you've had a wider tightening in criteria from lenders as well. On top of that, you've got the more specialist lenders, if you like, who often they don't fund from retail deposits. They fund possibly from capital markets. They've got hedging risk because they can't hedge till completion. All of that leads to what maybe was, say, a 40 billion market before might be significantly less than that today, possibly even sort of 10 billion or whatever the figure is. So that contraction is over-contracted. What has to happen now is the numbers need to stack up, for want of a better phrase, and it's going to take time to get there as rents are increased and you sort of have that match between tenant rents and landlord mortgage payments and what they're looking for from rents. And the whole thing needs to reset. That will happen. It will take time. Prior to that, I think what we're understanding is lenders understand that's a temporary market dislocation, because brought about by the mini budget, frankly. And what you've got is you've still got the protection of rent and income if you're a landlord. And actually, a landlord underwritten property is still a very good prospect. So what was written for the market pre-mini budget in terms of the ICR was well intended and worked extremely well. It's a temporary dysfunction. And in some course, I think the lenders will look at that and think, can I underwrite through that now and look through that as a problem? If they do, again, you'll start to see product come back, and I fully expect that through next year, not this year. So I think that follows behind owner-occupied, but it inevitably will start to ease.
Do you think that could generate a new market for accidental landlords?
The plus I can see is lots of new instructions and a lot more coming onto the market. And there's probably 3 or 4 reasons for that. There's interest rate pressure on landlords, as you just described. You've got the EPC changes, you've got the general interest rate change, not just on landlords, but in owner-occupied as well. And of course, you've got the CGT changes. So if I add all that up together, and I'm actually seeing this quite a bit locally now in terms of landlord disposals, by the way, I'm not sure if anyone else is, but I'm seeing a lot more property come on already, and I suspect that will increase through next year. So you're going to get a lot more stock for sale, which will have an impact on prices, obviously, and perhaps better balance supply and demand when the recovery comes through. But fundamentally, yes, I can see a few reluctant landlords, as we did, 15 years ago. But I will also see and predict, I think, a lot more property disposals and property coming on the market as a consequence of the cycle we're now in.